Hello. I think we've got a couple people on the line now. So just to make sure that you can hear me, if you could just type in the chat box that you can hear me. Be a good start. Awesome. Yay. Haven't done a live webinar in a little bit. Took a break for the summer, so it's good that I'm still working. Alrighty. So there are a couple other people that are registered that aren't here yet, but we are going to get started with just the welcome and you know, the slide I have to read at the beginning. If they do decide to join us, that's awesome. If not, that's fine because we have a group already, so it's okay. All right, so welcome. I hope that your Monday is off to a great start. Crazy, it's the last full week of August. I don't know where the time has gone, but it already feels like fall here because we woke up to fog and like 6 degrees, so it wasn't super warm here. But welcome. All right. So if you've been on a presentation before, you know I'm about to read a nice little slide that I do have to read before we get started. So the presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. Any reproduction or retransmission of slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden. Some of the topics discussed in this webinar may be of a sensitive nature and not appropriate for children, so we do ask for parental discretion. Just letting you know, we are talking about vaping today, so we are going to be talking that's a topic that's more appropriate for adults, but you should also be talking to, you know, if you do have teens or anything, that might be something that you want to be talking to them about as well. Please understand that people's stories are theirs alone to tell, and anything that is shared by participants in this webinar, either on camera or in the chat, is not to be discussed outside of the webinar. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on calfconnection.ca, so they do have their own YouTube channel there. Though active participation is definitely encouraged, you may simply follow along without using the chat or video microphone functions if you prefer. So I would encourage you definitely to participate using the chat function on the side that a couple people have already talked in. I generally don't turn on microphone or video functions for participants until the very end, and only then when somebody requests it, just because I find generally somebody forgets to turn off their mic, and then we can hear everything going on in the background because if you are definitely joining us from home, there can be anything and everything going on in the background, right? That being said, I'm going to apologize in advance if my dog barks while we're on this webinar. He's kind of had a 50-50 turnout rate for barking during webinars. Hopefully he decides to stay asleep during it. All right. So today, if you're here, I hope that you know what you joined up for. So we're going to be talking about vaping today. And the reason we chose this is because at 4 Wing Cold Lake, we're actually dedicating our August campaign to tobacco and vaping awareness. So that's why we're focusing on that, and we decided to open up as a national webinar. So if you haven't seen me before, my name is Lisa Fisher. I'm the health promotion specialist at 4 Wing Cold Lake, and we're just going to do a couple little poll questions before we get started, just so that I know kind of who's joining us and what your experience is with vaping. So bear with me for a moment while I grab that. So the first question here is, what is your affiliation to the CAF community? You're going to see that poll pop up. So I just need you to answer whether you're a serving member, a veteran, a family member, a civilian employee, or other. Now you may kind of fall under a couple of categories here, but just pick which one best describes you at this time. Okay, that was quick. Everyone's answered. So we've got a couple serving members, a couple veterans, and a civilian employee. So welcome. And the next question I have for you is, do you vape and or use e-cigarettes? The reason I use those two terminologies is that people kind of use them interchangeably sometimes, but also use them just individually as well. So I'm using both terminology just so that you kind of know exactly what I'm asking here. So you can say, yes, I do currently vape or use e-cigarettes. No, but I have in the past, and that can mean you were a user frequently, or you maybe just tried it once, or no, that you've never used it. Okay, so majority of people here have never actually used it. So, and one person is currently a vapor or an e-cigarette user. So welcome, fantastic. Okay, so I do want to mention before I get started is that keep in mind that vaping, when you think about it, is still relatively new, right? So we don't know as much about vaping as we know about, let's say, tobacco, right? Because tobacco's been around for so long. If you think about it, tobacco started being chewed or smoked about like 2,000 years ago. And as far back as, the 50s and 60s, we had major medical reports being released about the health effects of consuming tobacco. When you think about vaping, the first real commercially, what became the most commercially successful e-cigarette was released in 2003 or created in 2003 in Beijing. So that's pretty recent, which means that research hasn't necessarily caught up entirely because you have to have people who have been using it for a long period of time to know what the long-term effects are. So just keep that in mind when we're going through this presentation, that I'm giving you information based on what is known at this time, and that may change in the future based on what that research, comes out to be. I will say that research is definitely amping up in this area because you've seen that it's been introduced around the world, and then of course you've also seen that there's been a lot more regulations and things that come out. There's a lot more companies getting in on this, so that's why you'll see the research amping up. So before I get started on the actual content, what are some vapes that you've kind of heard of? So what are some companies that you think of? You can just type that in the type box, the chat box. Juul, yeah. I would say that's one of the most popular ones. Juul and Vape, yeah. Other people are being silent. That's okay. Yeah, so Juul and Vape are, I would say, pretty common ones. Vaper, really don't pay attention. Yeah. Yeah, I only mostly pay attention because obviously what I do for work, but also because we have quite a few vape stores and convenience stores and stuff that have the big posters and things on the wall and in their windows and things that are showcasing them. Okay, so just to give you some stats. I know stats are fun, right? This is from the Canadian Tobacco, Alcohol and Drug Survey of 2017. So a few years old at this point, but 15% of Canadians have tried a vaping product. Now, youth, which is between 15 to 19 years old, and young adults, which are 20 to 24 years old, have the highest rates have ever tried vaping. And you'll actually see that most of the concern is really around youth uptake, which is important because youth are definitely having a huge uptake in vaping, but we also don't want to forget the fact that people that are not youth are also using vaping or starting to vape. So we do want to remember that part. Among Canadians who used a vaping product in the past 30 days of when this survey was administered, 65% were current smokers, 20% were former smokers, and 15% have never smoked a cigarette. 32% of current or former cigarette smokers reported using vaping products as a quit smoking aid. And we're going to touch a little bit on that as well. There was also a survey done of more than 12,000 Canadians between the ages of 16 to 19, and they found that the number of those who reported vaping in the previous month had more than doubled in 2017. So when you look at it, it was 17.8% that had come out versus 8.4% previously. So that rate really increased. And the number who said that had ever tried vaping rose to 40.6% from 29.3%. So huge increases, right? It's definitely becoming a lot more popular. So for those who aren't really familiar, let's talk about what vaping is. I know I was super confused about it when it first started coming out, because I don't use cigarettes or vape, and I wasn't really sure what all this was about. So I definitely looked into it. So if you aren't sure what vaping is or what a vape is, that's okay. I'm here to kind of help you through that. So let's look at the components of a vaping device first. So I took this graphic from Health Canada. So you'll see that there's a mouthpiece section here, a tank or reservoir, which is where that vaping liquid is put in, the heating element, and then you'll see on the side there that it comes in many shapes and sizes. So that the first one, the long one that looks like a cigarette, that was kind of the first reiteration, and now they've really changed. They come in so many different shapes and sizes. Some of them look like, little USBs. They're very easy to kind of hide when you think of using them. They can be very, very small and easy to use and be inconspicuous. So most vaping devices do consist of that battery, that mouthpiece, the heating element, and a chamber, so that reservoir that contains the liquid solution. There are two kind of types. So there's vaping devices which are open, and those can be refilled, or there's ones that are closed. So closed ones mean that the whole product or the part that holds the vaping substance can't be refilled. So that means that you have to repurchase the full vaping device every time that you run out, essentially. There are many names for vaping products. So you'll see that some people just call it by the brand name, but also you'll hear mods, vapes, sub-ohms, vape pens, e-hookahs, tank systems, electronic cigarettes or e-cigarettes, which is why I use that terminology on that poll, electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, so that's a really long word, and also known, as I mentioned, by various brand names. So if you're hearing all those words being thrown around, chances are they're talking about a vaping device. So let's look at how it works, essentially. So first, there's a vaping liquid, which contains chemicals, is heated, and that becomes an aerosol. So that aerosol is inhaled through the mouth and lungs, where it's then absorbed into the bloodstream, and then the remaining aerosol is exhaled. So that's where you'll see that big, huge, cloud, essentially. So where you have people who smoke cigarettes, you have smoke that's coming out, right? And you can tell, but the aerosol cloud from vaping, I don't know if you've ever seen somebody vape, or we do have somebody that vapes on the call. They're quite large, right? It's interesting when you see people driving that are vaping, because you just see this massive cloud coming out of their vehicle. So the liquid solution is battery operated, and it heats that liquid solution. So that it is inhaled through that mouthpiece. So just kind of keep that in mind of how it kind of works. Now let's talk about the vaping liquid portion here. So again, these graphics are from Health Canada. So vaping liquid, most e-liquids that are sold are flavored. Most do contain nicotine, and they're generally in a liquid form. There are some that are offered as wax or herbs, but they're not as popular as the liquid form. The nicotine and or flavoring compounds are dissolved in a liquid mixture, which is typically either propylene glycol and or glycerol, which is vegetable glycerine, okay? It's important to remember that the levels of nicotine can really vary widely in the product. Some are very, very low, and some are actually more than a typical tobacco cigarette. I believe there is, and I'm not going to mention the company, but there is a company that states that one of their pods actually has as much nicotine as a pack of 20 cigarettes, right? So that can be quite a bit. It's also important to keep in mind that just because a product says it doesn't contain nicotine doesn't mean that it necessarily is nicotine free. There has been research that has shown, not just in Canada, but in the United States as well, that a lot of products that are saying it's nicotine free actually do contain nicotine, which hopefully that'll change now that we have some regulations in place in Canada. But then again, potentially not. So just be aware. The flavoring compounds are made of chemicals and blends of chemicals to create those different flavors. So obviously flavors are a big thing. There's so many different flavors available, and generally that's kind of what people like about it, because they don't like smoking a cigarette. Potentially they think it tastes gross or it smells gross or anything. And if you've ever vaped or been near somebody who vapes, I've been near somebody who vapes before, and it literally smelled like candy, right? Because they have all those different flavors available. which of course makes it very appealing to youth as well. So we're going to just take a really quick look at some federal regulation for vaping. It is important to be aware of regulations of your province and municipality, as well as your base or wing. So each base or wing is going to have a different tobacco policy, and vaping may be put in there. So just keep that in mind of wherever you're located, that you need to be aware of that. And then you need to be aware of your municipality and or your province, as well as federal. So it's the same thing as, you know, being aware of your tobacco policy or being aware of your cannabis policy. You need to be aware of the vaping policy as well. So the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, this actually became law in Canada on May 23rd, 2018. So it replaced the Tobacco Act to also include vaping products. So before it was the Tobacco Act, now it's Tobacco and Vaping Products Act. So it specifically says that vaping products cannot be sold or given to anyone under the age of 18. Now that might be different and be 19, depending on the province that you're in. In Alberta, it is 18 because the drinking age is 18 as well. And then the sale of vaping products that appeal to youth is not allowed. It does also give the federal government the ability to make rules about industry reporting, manufacturing standards, product and package labeling, so health warnings, banning the use of certain ingredients and flavors, and the promotion of vaping products. So it gives the federal government a lot of say in how vaping products are marketed, sold, and used in Canada. The Food and Drugs Act, this applies to vaping products that make a health claim. So if a vaping product says that it is intended to help quit smoking, then it is regulated under the Food and Drugs Act. It must receive authorization from Health Canada before it can be advertised, sold in Canada or commercially imported. The TVPA also applies to these products unless specifically excluded. So this is something to keep in mind if you're looking at something that says, oh, it helps quit smoking. You need to make sure that it is actually legit under the Food and Drugs Act. I'm also going to touch base on the Cannabis Act, and the reason being is because cannabis can also be vaped. We're mostly touching on tobacco vaping in here, but I did want to make sure that people were aware of this as well. So vaping products containing cannabis are regulated under the Cannabis Act and its regulations. And on October 17th, 2019, the cannabis extracts, which included vaping products, became legal for sale in Canada. Okay. So the next part we're going to go through is some vaping risks. So before I go through it, what are some things that you've heard of that are concerning for vape use? Whether it be, people that you know or news articles that you've seen, what have you heard? You just use a little chat box there. Lung issues, popcorn lung, oil in lungs. Same, yeah. Lungs are definitely an issue, and we're going to be talking about that. Awesome, thanks. Okay, so first I wanted to talk about vaping with nicotine. Oh, vape lung. Okay, well, we'll talk about the lung issues around that, and hopefully that'll kind of clear that up. So vaping with nicotine, first thing first is nicotine is highly addictive, okay? Whether in whatever form it is a highly addictive substance. It could lead to dependence, of course. You see the people who smoke, they are addicted to nicotine generally. It can cause nicotine addiction among users who wouldn't have started using a nicotine otherwise. So that essentially means that somebody who would not have started using, started smoking or started doing or what have you because they weren't interested in those types of substances or they weren't interested in being a smoker, they may pick up vaping because they don't mind the smell or the taste or their friends and their colleagues or their family are doing it, so why not? It could lead to nicotine addiction in those people that may not have necessarily used nicotine otherwise. Children and youth are definitely especially susceptible to nicotine. They can become dependent a lot more easily than an adult because they need lower levels of exposure than an adult. Nicotine is not known to cause cancer, and it has been approved for use in nicotine replacement therapies for people who are trying to, reduce their tobacco use or use due to tobacco cessation. Mostly those who are smokers. So it is used in that. It's not cancer causing, but it's still an addictive substance. So when we're talking about using nicotine, it can affect memory or concentration. It has been known to alter teen brain development. So then, yet again, for somebody who's wanting to use nicotine, we recommend that you wait until the brain's developed, which would be after the age of 25. And exposure during adolescence has been shown has been shown to lead to reduced impulse control and cognitive and behavioral problems. Nicotine poisoning, even in small amounts, vaping liquid containing nicotine can be very harmful if swallowed or absorbed through the skin. Now, children are really susceptible to this because they play with things, right? They don't really realize what's what. So we want to make sure that we have a container that has a child-resistant closure and a poison hazard symbol. These are required by law. So if you are purchasing something of a vaping liquid that does not have a child-resistant closure or a poison hazard symbol, then that means that it's not a legal product, okay? Just a couple other tips for your vaping liquids if you are having them in the house. We want to store out of sight and out of reach of children, adolescents, and pets. We want to store them in a cool and dry place where they can't be confused for food, drinks, or medicine. So don't store them in the same spot that you're storing your cough medicine, right? Close the container securely after each use. Wash your hands immediately after handling it. And if someone has swallowed the vaping liquid, please do call 911, as it is going to be an emergency at that point. So let's talk about the other chemicals that are in vapes. So vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, which I did mention before, they are considered safe for use in consumer products. However, long-term safety of inhaling them is unknown. So a lot of times when we talk about chemicals, both the vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol as well as flavoring chemicals, you'll see them saying, oh, they're safe. But they're not necessarily safe for inhaling because that research hasn't been done. So that's continuing to be assessed. So yet again, keep that in mind. Flavoring chemicals safely used by food manufacturers to add flavor and are safe to eat. However, they have not been tested regarding safety when inhaling. That research is still ongoing. So if you're inhaling a flavoring chemical, potential concerns with that as well. When vaping liquid is heated, it can create new chemicals such as formaldehydes and the contaminants that can be in vaping products and subsequently in the vapor. So nickel, tin, aluminum, those are potential contaminants that can actually be in the vaping product and then lead into that vapor. Vaping with more power and higher temperature can produce more chemicals. So if you're choosing to vape, you want to use a lower power and a lower temperature if possible. Now, the amount of substances a person is going to be exposed to in vaping is going to be affected by a variety of things. It's very similar to using any other drug. It's the amount that somebody is, exposed to is going to vary, right? So battery power, as I mentioned, higher battery power means higher exposure. The type of vaping device, the settings on the device. So if you're using more power, higher exposure, a combination of the internal components that are in there, type of vaping liquid and the amount of nicotine, of course. User behavior patterns, so depending on how frequent you use it, how deeply you're inhaling on it, and then users' experience with vaping as well. Okay, so next we're going to start going into those lung issues. So the first one here is popcorn lung. So chronic disease that damages the lungs' small airways is essentially what it is. The medical term, which I'm probably going to butcher a little bit here, is bronchiolitis obliterans. I definitely didn't do that correctly, but there is a medical term for it. It's not just called popcorn lung. It is still a concern right now that this can occur in people who vape, and it's caused by exposure to diacetyl. So that is actually a flavoring chemical that is used to give butter-like and other flavors to food products, but it's been used in vaping products to give that flavor. So, a popcorn type flavor for a vaping product. So it is being used. It has been named after workers who actually worked in popcorn plants who developed it after inhaling heat of flavors such as diacetyl. So if you are going to vape, I would recommend not using, a popcorn or butter type flavor, to making sure that that chemical is not in the vaping liquid that you're choosing. I believe it's becoming a little less common now, just because of this major concern here. But of course, there's a lot of other chemicals for the flavors and stuff as well still. Oh, I didn't even show you that one, sorry. Didn't realize that I hadn't moved that slide. There's your slide for you. Okay, so lung illnesses. So this came out pretty recently. Health Canada is advising Canadians who use vaping products to monitor themselves for symptoms of pulmonary illness. You probably, unless you don't watch the news at all, before all the COVID stuff happened, a huge thing in the news was a lot of hospitalizations among vapers. And that was due to pulmonary illnesses. So they were really trying to figure out what was going on. So pulmonary illness symptoms that you want to be aware of if you are a vapor or if you know somebody that vapes is including your cough, your shortness of breath, and chest pain. Now, right now, with COVID, those are also some symptoms of COVID as well. So either way, if somebody is a vapor or not, those would be things you would want to get checked out regardless. There may have been cases of severe pulmonary illnesses and deaths associated with the use of vaping products in the United States. The reason it says may have been is because they're still trying to confirm all of those instances, but there were definitely some issues there. Now, as of April 7th, 2020, they don't have anything updated since then. It kind of makes sense given what's going on in the world right now. But there were 19 cases of vaping-associated lung illnesses reported to the Public Health Agency of Canada. 11 of these were nicotine-only devices that they used, or vaping liquids that they used. Again, potentially using a vaping liquid that says it's not nicotine, but that could include nicotine in it. Or they could be using a cannabis one as well. There has been no specific substance or product that is clearly identified as the cause. However, the CDC has reported that chemical exposure may play a key role in lung illness from vaping. Potential substances that are being specifically investigated include vitamin E acetate and E flavors, as well as, of course, other toxins. So to just give you kind of an idea, vitamin E acetate is a form of vitamin E that's usually found in skincare products and dietary supplements. So again, they are, safe in those forms. Long-term oral exposure to high doses of vitamin E acetate can increase the risk of heart failure and all-cause mortality. However, the effects of inhaling those high doses is not known and more studies is needed. So you're going to see this recurring theme, right? More research, and more research. It's really needed in this area. The FDA has warned that when inhaled, vitamin E could lead to lipoid pneumonia, so issues with your lungs for sure. So that is definitely a concern. When you look at E flavors, so yet again, we're back to all those flavors that are available. Can anyone guess how many E flavors are available? Just type a number in the chat box. How many do you think would be available? Hundreds? $76. No one else wants to guess. Or they're really thinking very hard about it. All right, so it's a little higher than that. There are actually more than 7,500 e-liquid flavors available. That's a lot, right? So saccharides, which are used to sweeten flavors, can produce respiratory irritants, such as furans and aldehydes. When heated, there's a lot of big words in here that I normally don't pronounce in my everyday vocabulary, so I apologize if I'm saying them incorrectly. There are a few different ones that are used to provide various candy flavors. Diacetyl is one of those. So when heated and inhaled, they have been associated with chronic cough, bronchitis, asthma, and popcorn lung. And then there is another one called Polygon. Sorry. It is found in high levels in mint and menthol flavored e-liquids, and that has been found to have possible carcinogenic effects or cancer-causing effects. Okay. When we look at those other toxins, we've already mentioned vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol. They are the most popular solvents used to dissolve nicotine or cannabinoids in e-liquids. The heating process that vaporizes the e-liquid is sufficient enough to induce a thermal decomposition of these solvents. So that essentially means that they are put into compounds such as formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, acetone, propanol, all those substances that are actually known to have toxic properties and to induce mouth, throat, and lung irritation. Formaldehyde itself is a strong respiratory irritant. It's classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a human carcinogen or a cancer-causing chemical. Acrolein can damage the lung lining and irritate the nasal cavity and contribute to cardiovascular disease. And then acetone is a mucous membrane irritant, and inhalation can lead to hepatotoxic effects. So definitely some issues with the chemicals that are in there. Yet again, they haven't, nailed one specific substance or product as clearly being the reason behind lung illnesses, but there are some definite concerns in there. All right, so I do want to talk about secondhand vapor. Based on my personal experience, I feel that many people don't necessarily think of secondhand vapor as being harmful. And the reason I say that is because I've had a lot of people vape near me and not even consider it until I've said, I'd appreciate if you didn't do that. So secondhand vapor contains fewer chemicals than secondhand smoke, but it is not harmless. So just because it's less harm than one thing doesn't mean it's the best thing ever, right? Health effects from exposure are still unknown. They need to research that more. However, users need to be cautious around non-users and youth. Please don't just assume that you're in the clear to use vaping, next to other people. There is some evidence that vaping does increase the level of nicotine and other chemicals on indoor surfaces. So very similar to that third-hand exposure for smoking, where you have, if somebody is a smoker, you're going to have irritants that are left on furniture and clothing and those types of things. So keep that in mind if you are a vapor or a user, that you want to make sure that whoever you're vaping near is okay with you doing it, but also as a vapor themselves if you're going to, and not a non-user. Preferably don't vape near other people at all, just so that you're just not upping their exposure. Okay. Next is device malfunctions, which I'm sure people have also seen in the news. Those battery explosions are generally, front page news. Devices are regulated under the Consumer Product Safety Act. So defective batteries and defective products have caused fires and explosions before. So if a safety problem is noticed, we do want to make sure that we're reporting it. So report it to the manufacturer or retailer, preferably both, and also to the Government of Canada's online consumer product safety reporting page. So just like you would report a defect for any other consumer product, we want to report defects for that. And we are going to go over some tips for safe use on storage of those products so that we're not having, fires and explosions happening, unless it's, a fully defective product, and then it potentially could happen regardless, but try to reduce that harm as much as possible. So preventing injuries, do not modify your device. People do that, but it's really recommended that you don't. Make sure that you're buying batteries that are compatible with your device. So follow the manufacturer instructions. Buy batteries from a trusted source. So preferably probably from a vaping store or wherever you're buying your vaping products from that is legal. Don't carry lithium-ion batteries in your pocket or in a place where they can come in contact with loose coins, keys, or metal objects. So lithium-ion batteries and vaping devices do pose a hazard if they're not properly stored, used, carried, or charged. Okay, they can overheat. The lithium-ion batteries can overheat very easily, and then they can catch fire, explode when they can come in contact with a metal object. So most of the cases that I've seen on the news is somebody has put it in their pocket with their loose change, right? And so if they put in the loose change or their keys, and then it's caused, an explosion on their leg, which is not pleasant whatsoever and can lead to some definite injuries and issues there. So make sure that you're storing them properly. Keep spare batteries in a protective case versus just having them kind of willy-nilly everywhere. Put them in a protective case so that they're not coming in contact with objects that they shouldn't be. Read the manufacturer's instructions for storing and recharging your device. Don't just wing it. They're all different, right? And don't exceed the recommended charge time. Okay? Overcharging can also lead to issues. So, because COVID-19 is still most definitely a thing, I will mention vaping and COVID-19. And so this has been released by a couple different places. Canadian Centre for Substance Abuse and Addiction released some information on it. So as of March 2020, there is no evidence that vaping directly increases the risk of getting COVID-19. As you can see, that was at the beginning really of the pandemic. There still hasn't been an update released on that right now. However, keep in mind that ingredients and products can damage your lungs, so that potentially decreases your ability to fight infections, of which COVID-19 is an infection, and we want to make sure that we're, ready to fight that if we do happen to contract it. Researchers do believe that vaping may increase risk of more serious symptoms of COVID-19. So if you are not a vapor right now, we don't recommend that you're starting, of course, not just now, but anytime. And if you are currently vaping, then maybe looking at reducing your use or vaping cessation if that's a concern. Okay. So just some last thoughts. We're just going to go over a few tips about safe use or safer use if you're going to choose to vape. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to mention is if you are a current smoker, Health Canada has stated that vaping is less harmful in terms of chemicals if you do not use cigarettes at the same time, okay? And I'm saying in terms of chemicals because there is still other issues around it. As we mentioned, lung issues for sure, and we haven't fully realized what the long-term long-term health effects are. Using both together, so if you vape and you smoke at the same time, which quite a few people actually do, it is going to increase your exposure to harmful chemicals. And it is still recommended to use evidence-based nicotine replacement therapies, tobacco cessation medication, and or behavioral therapy instead of using vaping as a smoking cessation method. The World Health Organization itself has stated that they do not recommend vaping as a smoking cessation because it's not, it still has harms related to it, and because that research really hasn't been done. If you are not a smoker or tobacco user, do not start to vape, just because if you are starting to vape, you are just going to increase your risk because you're increasing your exposure to the chemicals that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to before. Avoid any illegal or unregulated products. We want to make sure that they are regulated if you are choosing to use them. If you are using something that's from the black market or unregulated, then it could expose additional risk to your health and safety. Monitor yourself for signs of pulmonary illness, so cough, shortness of breath, chest pain. I'm sure we're kind of all pretty vigilant right now of monitoring ourselves for any type of symptom, but we definitely want to ensure that we continuously monitor ourselves, and if we are having those symptoms, that you are going to seek assistance at a medical facility. I mentioned it before, but do not modify your vaping products. Do not add substances to your vaping products that are not intended to be added by the manufacturer. And do not use vaping products near non-users or use to reduce exposure to secondhand vapor. So again, for somebody who wants to quit smoking, and there may be people here that are current smokers, I didn't ask that question, or you may know somebody that is a current smoker, has been looking at potentially wanting to quit, but not sure how, or they've been thinking about vaping in order to quit. There are effective therapies available for those who smoke and want to quit, such as tobacco cessation medication. So your Champix is an example, or your Zyban. Nicotine replacement therapies, so your gum, your lozenges, your inhalers, all those types of things, and behavioral intervention. So for example, Butt Out is a program that the PSP Health Promotion runs as a self-help program. So you just need to contact your individual base or weighing health promotion team to get more information on that. If you want to quit vaping, talk to your healthcare provider and contact your local HP team to see if Butt Out could work for you. It is, based on smoking cessation, but many of the principles can still work for somebody who is vaping. So if you're wanting a behavioral intervention as well, then chat with the HP team, and there's potential that we could kind of work with you to make sure that that there's a program available for you. Again, we're going to recommend these methods versus choosing to vape if you're trying to quit smoking. Okay. Just to go over the references, in case you want to read more about vaping, because I definitely didn't touch on every single thing, and these websites do get updated. So Health Canada has a section saying all about vaping. They actually have some infographics there, and for anybody who has a workplace that they would want to put posters up or anything, you can actually order posters and mirror clings there. So we do that as well, and we put mirror clings up and everything on that. Center for Addiction and Mental Health, they have a whole section about vaping and COVID-19, and Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction is where we pulled a lot of that information on vaping linked with severe illnesses, so those illnesses. So you can definitely read up on those. And lastly, we just put our resource list that we put on every webinar right now. So if you are, needing some answers to some questions, or you're struggling with anything at this time, you have the Canadian Forces Member Assistance Program there, Canada Suicide Hotline, information on COVID-19 is from Government of Canada, Family Information Line, Sexual Misconduct Response Center, Kids Help Phone, and the CMP ARC as well. So that concludes what I'm going to talk about today. I'm just going to do a quick little poll there to ask, how you found, if you found the stuff helpful today, and then I'll open it up to questions if you do have any questions. So I'll add a little poll here. Here it is. So I feel I can apply what I learned today in my daily living. So strongly disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, or strongly agree. Awesome. So everyone has at least learned something today, which is fantastic. That's always the goal, right? So I will open it up now. If you do have any questions, feel free to chat. If you want me to turn on your mic or anything, I can do that. Talked about lungs, but what about teeth? So there's not really anything about teeth coming out. Really, I wouldn't say that I know much about vaping and teeth. The issue, of course, with tobacco is the tar and everything, and the chemicals that are right in the mouth right there, right? So that's been shown to have issues with your teeth. Vaping hasn't had anything that's come out so far that I'm aware of. But you know what? You can talk to your dentist, actually, because they do ask about vaping now, and just ask if they are aware of any issue that has come out with that. Thank you, Trina. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. If there are any other questions, feel free to ask. If not, you can just let me know that you're good to go, just so that I don't shut the webinar on you, because that would not be very nice. Good to go, okay. Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us today, or me. There's just me. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a great week. Enjoy the last full week of August. I refuse to say summer is over. I don't want summer to be over yet, so enjoy your week. I actually will be back I'm doing another national webinar in September. We're doing a local webinar. We've decided to actually push nationally because why not? So if you want to join us, we're doing a mental resilience webinar on September 10th, actually at night. So for anybody who's back to work and can't join during the day, it's actually going to be in the evening, so you can check that out as well. Thank you for joining me again. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.